hours of no sleep. It's not that great. I was very tired. But yeah, so what really I'd argue that core loops need to be is take these different tasks and really abstract them to goals, because each one of these is a goal. It is saying, I want to mine now. I should survive now. I should craft now. Most of my life in New York has been I should survive now. Middling success rate, please, devs, please balance. With the goal pursuit rate, and I think, let me talk through exactly what's happening here. You onboard the player, so the player sees a goal and decides, I want to pursue this goal. And to some extent, there's probably should be a bouncing loop right here, because you can't add infinite goal options. They will get overwhelmed. But having multiple goals to choose from, such as I should mine this tree, I should walk that way, I should hide, whatever. Like, if you give players multiple options, both extrinsic means when the developer codes the things specific, into the game. Extrinsic motivations are it's natural disaster survival telling you need to survive. Intrinsic motivations are you going to the highest point and then using a dance emote as the tornado wipes out the building. You didn't have to do that, but you had a lot more fun because you did. And a designer, while they can't technically add intrinsic loops, they can predict them. Like, just anyone who's had experience with games, this is probably an example of negative intrinsic goal prediction, where whenever I have a customization game, I know I need to have a few safeguards in place, because whenever you give the player the chance to customize, they're going to try to make something awful. Especially with my game Night Ships, I was thinking of all these weird ship shapes which I would not want people to make and then make a video about. So that's predicting intrinsic goals. So you need to give them goals. Intrinsic and extrinsic doesn't matter. They need to have those goals. And then once they've considered the goal, what % of players pursue this goal? And once they've pursued that once they've made clear that they want this to happen, how many of them survive onboarding? How many of them realize, I want to do this, but then go, oh, wait, I don't know how? How many of them get through that part? And then once they've gotten through that part, how many of them actually accomplish the task? How many of them actually reach that goal? And with all of those, and by the way, not reaching your goal, that can either be them quitting, or that can be just them never achieving it, like them failing. Like, it can. So it's not necessarily as clear. It's that's why I'm doing it based on success, a success rate, because there are 100 different reasons you could fail. But if you have a clear idea of what the success scenario is, you can track for that. You can measure for that. And that's the thing. These blue areas, they're so complicated. So there's so many nested systems here. All you can do is sort of check the temperature. And that's why your doctor says you are a certain degrees warm rather than a certain degrees cold, compared to, the heat, like the center of a star. Like, they don't say, oh, you're negative 5 million degrees Kelvin, because no. Anyway, focusing. What you need to keep your game interesting is these goals layered. Who here likes Shrek? Let me provide you the game design onion. We have the player and their immediate goal. For example, in Minecraft, we're assuming you just started Minecraft, like you just entered the game. What do we want to do first? Okay, let's find a tree. Okay, yeah. Oh, there's a tree over there. Cool. Found a tree. Did that in 5 seconds. That's just. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, I started punching these blocks, and now I'm I'm going to try to get wood. So I'm going to go towards that tree, start punching blocks, and next thing you know, I've mined wood. They accomplished that. People can usually get through this part. Now, okay, I have wood. Now what? You need to craft something, and if I had to guess, this is where the drop-off happens. This is where new users start getting lost. And I'm not saying that, Minecraft has pretty okay onboarding. The crafting system crafting games are really bad at providing the recipes to the users. I don't know what the deal is, but there are so many crafting games which I have to look up the recipes online. I shouldn't have to do that. Yeah. devs be better. I feel probably shouldn't be saying that because otherwise people are going to look at my games and be like, "Ooh, should he really be criticizing games?" Yeah, no, but crafting the workbench. You have people like you have that's like the minute long goal, and so you craft the workbench, and then with the workbench you can now craft the wooden pickaxe, and then from there you can find a cave, and there you can find iron. But the thing is, not only for a game to be fun and compelling, this is not just me saying the player should do these things in a row. Because here's the thing: like, why wouldn't I just draw a line from A to B to C to Z? Like, why not just draw a line directly through there? Because this is actually happening at once. This is the player's cognition. When you join Minecraft, you know what you want to do. You want to find iron. That's your goal. In order to get there, you know the steps you need to take to get that. This is the player thinking, what am I doing now? Why am I doing that? Why do I want to do 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 that? And it's to find iron. And like, that's the thing. Like, this is the player comprehending all of this at once. I've ended it at about 6 or 7 because really players don't think about that stuff because players have a limit for how much they can remember at once. So don't like overload them with goals, but making sure that you have spaced out, ideally in a sort of a logarithmic way to get expanded over time. And as a player accomplishes a goal, it needs to be refilled. If the player finds iron, they should have this much worth of stuff still in their head. When they find a tree, once they've started mining trees, it should unlock new things behind find iron. Like, you need to keep adding stuff. You need to keep supplying them with new interesting goals. And from there, it's like, let's see. And I think I talked about, I spoiled this earlier. This is what I'm talking about. Like, the player has the craft workbench goal. And then from there, they decide, okay, I want to make a workbench. And like, that's the thing. This system is for every one of these goals. They are at a different stage in this system for all of them. And you can't even really tell if they're pursuing it until they get there. Like, that's the difficult part about tracking this stuff. You don't know if they were looking for iron. Once they go follow this certain path to iron, you can then contextualize, like, okay, they were trying to find iron. But yeah, like, arguably, this is probably the one area where you will still probably need playtesters because you can't read their minds. That's just the reality. And when your game relies on intrinsic goals, to some extent, you have to ask them. You have to measure that. It won't be reliable, but you might be able to give you an idea of what's happening, so you can test for that in a reliable way. From there, yeah. So crafting the workbench, they do all this stuff, and this, as I said, this loop is actually for each one of these little boring loops. It has this, and at every moment, the player is going through all of those loops at once, and making new loops and removing old loops as they're accomplished, and just progressing in a linear fashion through this chain of loops. And I'd say that people failing to create consistent long-term loops, that is the reason most games on Roblox fail. It is because because typically devs are okay at mechanic design. They're like, oh, this was fun. You'll get those tweets on Twitter which get thousands of likes and be like, oh wow, that's so cool. That was amazing. And then like you play the game and it's boring. It's because or even a movie trailer. I think that's a great example. Think of a movie trailer with that was cool. Now that was a good 2.5 minutes of movie. A movie isn't 2.5 minutes long. A movie can be up to 2.5 hours long these days. Sometimes 3 if the director's really pretentious. And with that, you kind of basically the advertisement is saying the majority of this movie is not stuff that we can market to you as interesting. And that's the problem, because all these things, they're bite-sized goals that you can understand. But if you don't track how well a player is progressing through them and when these kind of gaps appear, like let's say that instead of crafting a workbench, you just told them to find a cave. What if that was their first step and they spawned a place far away from caves? They'll go a good 5 minutes without knowing what to do. And anyone who's seen like a player quit chart will know you can lose like a good majority of your players in the first 5 minutes. Like you can lose 80% if you don't do it right. Heck, you can lose 30. You can lose 20 to 30% in the first minute. Like I see that happen in games all the time. And yeah, so like you need to make sure that these goals always exist, and not only that they exist, but that they are compelling. Really, looking at this, finding a tree and mining wood, it's not that interesting. It's not super interesting. But what it is it's a path. It's a step to the next thing. And you'll notice games that are described as grindy, as like where like you're bored, but you do it to get to the long-term goals. That's when these immediate goals aren't interesting. Can you imagine if someone described like Fortnite as a grind? Like, I keep having to play the game to get new skins. And like maybe someone who really cares about the skins and doesn't care about the game will feel that way. But most players play it because the game's the fun part. Because the tenseness of going through things, that's fun. Because it's not necessarily, even though they love winning, the game is fun when they lose as well. You can't just have the final goal be interesting. Otherwise your game will feel grindy. Make every goal as interesting as you can possibly make it, whether that be through crisp sound design and like a fun little popping effect for Minecraft. That mining's fun to some extent. Like when you mine bricks or blocks, that's somewhat enjoyable. And when you're actually mining under the ground, there's sort of that little suspense of like, am I about to come across a diamond, iron? There's uncertainty. That's interesting. Mining can be interesting, and that's the 30-second loop. 1 minute loop, that's also interesting. 2 minute, like that's the thing. The more of these that you can get in, and the more interesting you can make them, that is your game's success. That is where your game does well. And from there, you have this little swoopy hair. It looks kind of like a face. But yeah, no, I guess we'll just move on to the next part. So the adding Ed here to the system, you can kind of see how this entire loop just plays over and over again with different levels of goals. And since that entire area before was kind of misleading with the various, like it makes it look like it's a one and done thing, when really it is this entire stack of goals layered on top right here. And you need to track all of them, because if a single one of these is messing up, you're losing players. You might not lose all of them, but you're losing them. Yeah, and so from there, we have, so that's the experience system. That's what you need to figure out. Now that we understand what this means, we can also better appreciate this area, where if certain goals take longer, like say that you have, say that you focus on just, on like, what if you stretch these goals by 10%? Maybe this takes 11 minutes, this takes 5.5, this takes 2.2, 1.1, 33 seconds, 6 seconds. If you stretch it just a little bit, it might not be as fun, but you'll get a longer session duration. See? It lowers the enjoyment, but in a way that increases the session duration, which increases the number of concurrent players, which increases the amount of players in the server, as well as a bunch of stuff like retention, which increases the messaging rate, which increases the enjoyment of the game. So technically, there's an argument here for lengthening certain mechanics just for the reason that it'll make your game longer, because it loops back around into making onboarding a bit easier. Because if your game's a bit longer, there are more players in it at once, and there are more people talking, more people having fun together, and so it's weird. That's why I mapped this out. That's why the system's so important. That's why this is a model, because you need to understand it. Because that kind of thing of when do I make my mechanic a little bit longer? If you didn't see this entire system and everything tied together, there's no way you would have thought, I should increase the average duration a bit to get people to talk more. Like, maybe if you're super talented, by all means, go for it. Be cool. But I know that most people, or maybe just me, maybe I'm stupid, would not have gotten that. And that's why these models matter, because you have to look through how a single change in one area is tied to everything else. And the more you can consider that, the more you will avoid setbacks, the more efficient you can be as a developer. Because your job is getting smaller and smaller, but this is still where it matters. In this blue area where these messes of systems all work together. And yeah, so that is that's the meta model.